I never thought I'd be the kind of man to lie to my own children. But when you're staring down the barrel of your own mortality, you do things you never imagined. My name is Edward Harlan, 62 years old, widower, father of 3, and, according to the doctor, a man with 1 month left to live. Or so I told them. The truth is murkier, but the lie was a spark, and what it ignited in my family burned hotter than I could have predicted. It started with a dinner, one of those rare gatherings where my kids Clara, Marcus, and Lila sat around the same table without someone storming out. I'd spent years watching them drift, their loyalty to each other fraying like an old rope. Clara, my eldest, sharp as a blade and twice as cold, built a real estate empire, but carried grudges like heirlooms. Marcus, the middle child, was a dreamer who never landed, always chasing schemes that left him broke and bitter. Lila, the youngest, was the heart of us, a painter whose warmth hid a quiet rage. They were my legacy, but they were strangers to each other, and I was to blame for letting it get that way. The dining room smelled of rosemary and regret that night. I'd cooked their favorite roast lamb, mashed potatoes, green beans, hoping it would soften the blow. They laughed at first, trading stories about their mother, Ellen, gone 5 years now. Her absence still hung heavy, a ghost at every family gathering. I waited until the plates were cleared, until the clink of wine glasses stilled, before I dropped the bomb. "I've got cancer," I said, voice steady despite the knot in my chest. "Stage 4. 1 month, maybe less." The silence that followed was deafening, like the air had been sucked out of the room. Clara's fork froze halfway to her mouth. Marcus's jaw tightened, his eyes darting to the floor. Lila's hand flew to her chest, a gasp caught in her throat. I let the lie settle, watching their faces for cracks, for signs of who they'd become when the world tilted. Clara recovered first, always the pragmatist. "What kind?" she asked, her voice clipped, like she was negotiating a deal. "Pancreatic," I said, sticking to the script I'd rehearsed. It was believable enough, fast, brutal, no hope. Marcus pushed his chair back, the screech of wood on wood like a scream. "You're joking, right? Dad, tell me you're joking." His voice cracked, and for a moment, I saw the boy who used to cling to my leg during thunderstorms. Lila just stared, her eyes welling up, her fingers twisting the napkin into knots. I wanted to reach for her, to tell her it was okay, but I couldn't. Not yet. This was the test, the crucible. I needed to know what they'd do when they thought I was slipping away, when the safety net of my presence was gone. The truth? I wasn't dying. Not yet. The doctor's visit had been real, but the diagnosis was a shadow on a scan, a maybe, not a death sentence. I'd twisted it into something final because I needed to shake them awake. My will, the one I'd written after Ellen died, split everything evenly: house, savings, the cabin upstate. But I'd seen the cracks in them, the greed and resentment bubbling under the surface. I wanted to believe they'd rise above it, that they'd come together when the end came. So I lied. I told them I had 1 month to live, and I waited to see who they'd become. That first night, they stayed late, their voices overlapping in a chaotic symphony of grief and disbelief. Clara took charge, as always, pulling out her phone to research specialists, treatments, clinical trials. "We're not giving up," she said, her eyes fierce, but I saw the calculations behind them. She was already thinking about the estate, the assets, the paperwork. Marcus paced, muttering about second opinions, his hands shaking as he poured another glass of wine. Lila clung to me, her head on my shoulder, whispering, "Why didn't you tell us sooner?" Her tears soaked my shirt, and guilt gnawed at me, but I held firm. This was for them, I told myself. For us. The next morning, the house felt different, like a stage reset for a new act. Clara showed up with a lawyer's card, talking about power of attorney and medical directives. "We need to be prepared," she said, her tone all business, but her eyes betrayed a flicker of something else: fear, maybe, or hunger. Marcus was quieter, withdrawn, scrolling through his phone with a distracted frown. Lila brought me a painting, a small canvas of a sunset over the lake we used to visit as a family. "To remind you of the good times," she said, her voice soft but trembling. I hung it in my study, where I could see it while I watched them unravel. Over the next week, the cracks widened. Clara started asking about the will, subtle at first, then blunt. "You've got everything in order, right, Dad? No loose ends?" Her questions were laced with an edge, like she was sizing up her share. Marcus, meanwhile, started dropping hints about his latest Venturia tech startup that just needed a little capital to get off the ground. He thought he was clever, but I saw the desperation in his pitch, the way he avoided my eyes. Lila was the only one who didn't ask for anything, but her silence worried me most. She'd always been the one to hold us together, but now she seemed to be pulling away, her sketches growing darker, her smiles rarer. I kept a journal, hidden in my desk, where I wrote down everything, every word, every glance, every moment that revealed who they were. I told myself it was for clarity, to make sense of their choices, but deep down, I knew it was evidence. Proof of whether they deserved what I'd built, what Ellen and I had sacrificed for. By the end of the first week, I was already rethinking the will. Clara's ambition was suffocating, Marcus's recklessness exhausting, but Lila's withdrawal cut deepest. I'd lit the match, and now the fire was spreading, faster than I'd expected. The second week brought the first real fight. Clara found out Marcus had been borrowing money from me for years, small loans he never repaid. She cornered him in the kitchen, her voice low and venomous. "You think you can just leech off him forever? He's dying, Marcus. Grow up." Marcus fired back, accusing her of hoarding the family's wealth, of cutting him out of deals she'd brokered with my connections. Lila tried to mediate, but they turned on her, too, blaming her for staying neutral, for not picking a side. I stood in the doorway, unnoticed, watching my children tear each other apart. It was worse than I'd feared, but it was exactly what I'd needed to see. That night, I sat alone in my study, the journal open in front of me. I wrote, "They're not ready. Not for this, not for each other." The lie was working, stripping away the masks they'd worn for years. But it was also breaking something in me, the part that still believed we could be a family again. I thought of Ellen, of her hope that our kids would always have each other, no matter what. I'd promised her I'd keep them together, but now I wasn't sure I could. Or if I even should. The lie grew heavier with each passing day, like a stone sinking deeper into my chest. I'd expected the truth to reveal itself slowly, but my children were unraveling faster than I could keep up. Clara's visits became more frequent, her questions sharper, always circling back to the will. She'd sit across from me in the living room, her laptop open, spreadsheets glowing in the dim light. "Dad, we need to talk about the lake house," she'd say, her voice smooth but insistent. "It's a liability if it's not managed properly." I nodded, pretending to consider her words, but I saw the glint in her eyes, the way she cataloged every asset like a vulture circling a carcass. I wanted to shake her, to ask where the girl who used to climb trees with me had gone, but I held my tongue. This was the test, and she was failing it. Marcus, meanwhile, was spiraling. He'd show up late, reeking of whiskey, his pitches growing wilder. One night, he cornered me in the garage, his eyes bloodshot, his voice desperate. "Dad, I've got a guy who can triple your investment in 3 months. Just give me a piece of the estate now before." He trailed off, unable to say the word dying. I looked at him, my son, and saw a stranger begging for scraps. "Marcus," I said, my voice low, "this isn't about money." He laughed, a bitter, hollow sound, and stormed off, slamming the car door so hard the windows rattled. I wrote in my journal that night, "He's lost, but he doesn't know it yet." Lila was the enigma. She'd spend hours in the attic, where Ellen used to keep her old art supplies, painting furiously. I'd find her there, surrounded by canvases of storms and broken bridges, her hands smudged with charcoal. She rarely spoke about the diagnosis, but her eyes carried a weight I couldn't ignore. One afternoon, I found her crying in the garden, clutching a photo of us from years ago, a family picnic, all 5 of us laughing under a summer sky. "I don't want to lose you," she whispered when I sat beside her. I wanted to tell her the truth, to pull her into my arms and confess, but I couldn't. Not yet. Instead, I said, "You'll always have me, Lila. No matter what." It was the closest I'd come to breaking. The third week brought a new kind of chaos. Clara discovered Marcus had been digging into my financial records, trying to figure out how much I was worth. She confronted him in the dining room, her voice rising until it echoed off the walls. "You're a parasite," she spat, her hands clenched into fists. Marcus didn't back down, throwing accusations of his own about how she'd manipulated me into signing over power of attorney years ago, how she'd always been the favorite. Lila tried to intervene again, but this time, Clara turned on her. "Stop acting like you're above this, Lila. You're just waiting for your cut, same as us." Lila's face crumpled, and she fled the room, leaving me to watch my children fracture further. I started to notice things I hadn't before: small betrayals, hidden agendas. Clara had been meeting with a lawyer behind my back, drafting documents I hadn't authorized. Marcus was making calls to old business partners, name-dropping me to secure loans he'd never repay. Lila, though, was the one who surprised me most. I found a letter in her sketchbook, half-finished, addressed to me. It wasn't meant for my eyes, not yet, but I read it anyway. Dad, I know you think we're broken, but I'm trying to fix it. I just don't know how. Her words hit me like a fist, and for the first time, I wondered if I'd gone too far. The lie was a living thing now, twisting through our lives, exposing every fault line. I'd wanted to test their loyalty, but I hadn't expected to see so much ugliness. Clara's ambition had hardened into greed, Marcus's desperation into recklessness, and Lila's silence into a kind of quiet rebellion. But there were moments fleeting, fragile that gave me hope. Clara brought me soup one evening, her hands lingering on mine as she set the bowl down. Marcus fixed the creaky porch step without being asked, whistling an old tune Ellen used to sing. Lila left a new painting on my bedside table, a portrait of me and Ellen, our faces soft in the glow of memory. These were the threads I clung to, the proof that they weren't lost, not completely. By the end of the third week, I was exhausted, the weight of the lie pressing down on me. I'd started to lose track of where the deception ended and the truth began. I'd catch myself staring at the medical report the Real one, tucked away in my safe, wondering if I'd tempted fate by inventing a death sentence. The journal was filling up, page after page of observations, doubts, and regrets. They're fighting for pieces of me, not for each other, I wrote one night, the words blurring as my eyes burned. I'd wanted to bring them together, but all I'd done was drive them further apart. Then came the night that changed everything. It was late, past midnight, when I heard voices downstairs. I crept to the top of the stairs, my heart pounding, and listened. Clara and Marcus were in the kitchen, their voices low but fierce. "He's not even gone yet, and you're already carving up the estate," Clara hissed. Marcus laughed, a cold, jagged sound. "Don't pretend you're not doing the same, Clara. I saw the papers. You think you're slick, but you're just like me." I waited for Lila's voice, for her to step in, to calm them, but she wasn't there. I realized then that she'd stopped trying, that she'd given up on us. I went back to my room, my hands shaking as I opened the journal. I wrote, "This is my fault. I thought I could control this, but I've only made it worse." The lie had been a spark, yes, but it had ignited a fire I couldn't contain. I'd wanted to see their true selves, but what I saw was a reflection of my own failure-resme absence, my silence, my inability to keep them close after Ellen died. I closed the journal and stared at Lila's painting on the wall, the sunset glowing like a promise I hadn't kept. I knew then that I had to end it, that I had to tell them the truth. But first, I had to face what they'd become and what I'd made them. The fourth week dawned with a quiet that felt more like surrender than peace. The house, once filled with the clamor of my children's voices, now held only echoes of their arguments. I'd lit the match, and the flames had consumed more than I'd intended. Clara stopped bringing her laptop, but her questions grew colder, more pointed. "Have you thought about who'll handle the trust?" she asked one morning over coffee, her eyes locked on mine like a predator's. I nodded vaguely, dodging the question, but inside, I was rewriting her place in my heart. Marcus, meanwhile, was barely present, his visits sporadic, his excuses flimsier each time. When he did show up, he was distracted, his phone buzzing with messages he didn't want me to see. Lila was the ghost, slipping in and out of the house without a word, her paintings piling up in the attic like a diary of her grief. I started to notice the small thefts. A silver watch Ellen had given me was missing from my dresser. A stack of old bonds I kept in the study vanished. I didn't confront them, not yet, but I wrote it all down, every betrayal a mark against them. The journal was my confessor, the only place I could be honest about the pain of watching my children turn into strangers. "They think I'm already gone," I wrote one night, the words jagged on the page. Maybe I am. The lie had done its work, stripping away their pretenses, but it had also stripped away my hope. I'd wanted to see their loyalty, their love, but all I saw was greed and resentment, simmering like poison. Then came the letter from Lila. I found it tucked inside my journal, slipped between the pages like a secret she couldn't say aloud. It was longer than the one I'd glimpsed in her sketchbook, written in her looping handwriting, stained with smudges of charcoal. "Dad, I don't know how to fix this. Clara and Marcus are tearing each other apart, and I'm too tired to stop them. I keep thinking about Mom, about how she'd know what to say, how to make us whole again. I'm angry at them, at you, at myself. But I love you. I just wish I could show it better." I read it 3 times, each word a knife in my chest. Lila was the one I'd hurt most. the one who'd believed in me longest. I wanted to find her, to tell her everything, but I couldn't. Not until I knew what Clara and Marcus would do next. The 5th week brought a reckoning. Clara came to me with a proposal, her voice calm but calculated. She wanted to buy out Marcus and Lila's shares of the estate, to streamline things after I was gone. It's what's best for the family, she said. But her eyes betrayed Hershey was consolidating power, not protecting us. I listened, nodding, but inside, I was seething. She wasn't just betraying her siblings. She was betraying me, assuming I was too weak to see through her. Marcus, meanwhile, had gone quiet, too quiet. I caught him in my study one night, rifling through my desk, looking for God knows what. When I confronted him, he flinched, his face pale. I need to know you're taken care of, Dad, he stammered, but the lie was as thin as paper. I let him go, but I added another note to the journal. Marcus is desperate. He'll do anything. Lila was the one who broke me. She came to me one evening, her eyes red, her hands trembling. I can't do this anymore, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I can't watch them fight over you like you're already dead. She told me she was leaving, going to stay with a friend in the city, away from the chaos. I wanted to beg her to stay, to tell her the truth, but the words caught in my throat. Instead, I hugged her, feeling her shake against me, and promised I'd call her soon. After she left, I sat in the dark, the journal open in my lap, and wrote, I've lost her. I've lost them all. The lie was a monster now, devouring everything in its path. I'd wanted to test them, to see if they could rise above their flaws, but all I'd done was push them further into the darkness. Clara's greed, Marcus's desperation, Lila's despair, they were all my doing, reflections of my failure to hold them together after Ellen died. I thought of her every day, her laughter, her strength, the way she'd always known how to bridge the gaps between us. I'd promised her I'd take care of them, but I'd broken that promise, and now I was paying the price. The 6th week was when I decided to end it. I couldn't keep up the charade any longer, not when it was tearing us apart. I called a family meeting, telling them it was urgent, that I had something important to say. They arrived separately, each carrying their own baggage of anger and guilt. Clara sat stiffly, her arms crossed, her eyes narrowed. Marcus slouched in his chair, avoiding my gaze. Lila sat closest to me, her hands folded in her lap, her face unreadable. I took a deep breath, the medical report, the real one clutched in my hand. I need to tell you something. I began, my voice shaking. I'm not dying. The silence was absolute, a void that swallowed the room. Clara's mouth fell open, her eyes wide with shock. Marcus let out a choked laugh, like he couldn't believe what he'd heard. Lila just stared, her expression shifting from confusion to betrayal. I told them everything, the shadow on the scan, the uncertainty, the lie I'd crafted to test them. I told them about the journal, about the things I'd seen, the things they'd done. I didn't hold back, not about Clara's scheming, Marcus's thefts, or Lila's withdrawal. I laid it all bare, my voice breaking as I admitted my own failures, my own betrayal. Clara was the first to speak, her voice sharp as glass. You lied to us? You put us through this for what? Some twisted game. Marcus didn't say anything, his face pale, his hands clenched into fists. Lila stood, her chair scraping against the floor, and walked out without a word. I called after her, but she didn't stop. The room felt emptier without her, and I knew I'd crossed a line I couldn't uncross. I'd wanted to bring them together, but all I'd done was break them apart. The truth hung in the air like smoke, choking us all. Clara's anger was a living thing, her eyes blazing as she leaned across the table. You played us, Dad. You made us think you were dying, and for what? To prove we're terrible people. Her words cut deeper than I'd expected, each one a reminder of the trust I'd shattered. Marcus still hadn't spoken, his silence louder than any outburst. He stared at the floor, his shoulders hunched, as if the weight of my deception had crushed him. Lila's absence was the worst of it, though. I kept glancing at the door, hoping she'd come back, but the house stayed quiet, her footsteps long faded. I tried to explain, my voice hoarse from the effort of holding myself together. I wanted to see who you'd be when the stakes were high. I wanted to know if you'd come together, if you'd fight for each other, not just for what I'd leave behind. Clara laughed, a sharp, bitter sound that echoed in the empty room. And what did you find, Dad? That we're all monsters? Congratulations, you got what you wanted. She grabbed her coat and left, the door slamming behind her. Marcus lingered a moment longer, his eyes meeting mine for the first time. I thought I was losing you, he said, his voice barely audible. I didn't know what to do. Then he was gone, too, leaving me alone with the wreckage of my plan. I spent the next day in a daze, the journal untouched, the medical report crumpled on my desk. I'd expected relief when I told the truth, but all I felt was loss. I'd wanted to test their loyalty, to see if they could be the family Ellen had believed in, but I'd only proven how far we'd fallen. I called Lila, leaving voicemails she didn't answer. I texted Clara, but her responses were curt, one-word replies that felt like slaps. Marcus didn't respond at all, his silence a wall I couldn't breach. I wandered the house, touching the things Ellen had loved, the quilt she'd made, the teapot she'd painted, searching for some piece of her wisdom to guide me. The 7th week was a turning point, though not the one I'd hoped for. Clara came back, unannounced, her face pale but composed. She sat across from me in the living room, her hands folded tightly in her lap. "I've been thinking," she said, her voice steady but softer than before. "I was angry, still am, but I get why you did it. You wanted to see the truth. Well, you saw it. I'm not proud of how I acted, but I'm not going to apologize for wanting to protect what's ours." She paused, her eyes searching mine. "What now, Dad? What do you want from us?" It was the first time she'd asked, really asked, and I didn't have an answer. I told her I needed time, that I was still figuring it out. She nodded, but I could see the doubt in her eyes, the fear that I'd never trust her again. Marcus showed up the next day, sober for the first time in weeks. He didn't mention the lie, didn't ask about the will. Instead, he brought a box of old photos, ones he'd found in his apartment, pictures of us when they were kids, camping trips, birthdays, moments I'd forgotten. We sat on the porch, flipping through them, laughing at Marcus's bowl cut, at Clara's braces, at Lila's paint-splattered overalls. For a moment, it felt like we were us again, the family we'd been before life pulled us apart. "I screwed up, Dad," he said finally, his voice low. "Not just now, but for years. I want to do better." I wanted to believe him, but the journal's weight lingered in my mind, its pages filled with his betrayals. Lila was still gone, her absence a hole in the house. I drove to her friend's apartment in the city, a cramped walk-up with peeling paint and a buzzer that didn't work. She opened the door, her eyes wary, her hair pulled back in a messy bun. "I'm not ready to talk," she said, but she let me in anyway. The apartment smelled of turpentine and coffee, her canvases leaning against every wall. We sat on the couch, the silence stretching between us until I couldn't bear it. "I'm sorry," I said, the words spilling out. "I thought I was helping, but I hurt you most of all." She didn't cry, didn't yell, just looked at me with those eyes that saw too much. "You didn't trust us," she said. "That's what hurts." I left her there, promising to give her space, but the drive home was the loneliest I'd ever felt. The 8th week was when I started to rewrite the will. Not the legal document, not yet, but in my head, in my heart. I'd seen their worst, but I was starting to see their best, too. Clara's fierce determination, Marcus's fragile hope, Lila's quiet strength, they were still there, buried under the mess I'd made. I wrote in the journal, "They're not perfect, but neither am I. Maybe that's enough." I started small, inviting them over separately, talking about the past, about Ellen, about the things we'd lost. Clara opened up about her fear of failing, of not living up to the empire she'd built. Marcus admitted he'd been running from his own mistakes, using me as a crutch. Lila sent me a new painting, a bridge mended with gold, a silent promise that she wasn't giving up. The lie had broken us, but it was also forcing us to face the truth, not just about each other, but about ourselves. I'd wanted justice, a clear line between right and wrong, but what I found was messier, more human. Clara wasn't just greedy, she was scared. Marcus wasn't just reckless, he was lost. Lila wasn't just silent, she was healing. And me? I was a father who'd failed them, who'd let grief and fear turn him into a liar. But I was also a father who loved them, who'd do anything to see them whole again. By the end of the 8th week, I knew what I had to do. The will, the real one, was still in the safe, unchanged, but I was ready to rewrite it, not out of anger or disappointment, but out of hope. I called another family meeting, my hand steady this time, my heart full. They didn't know it yet, but this was the beginning of the end, the moment we'd start to rebuild. The family meeting was set for a Saturday, the air crisp with the promise of fall. I'd spent the night before pacing the house, the journal open on my desk, its pages a map of our unraveling and, maybe, our redemption. I didn't know if they'd come, not after everything, but when the doorbell rang, my heart leapt. Clara arrived first, her coat buttoned tight, her face guarded but softer than before. Marcus followed, his hands stuffed in his pockets, a nervous smile flickering on his lips. Lila was last, her sketchbook tucked under her arm, her eyes meeting mine with a cautious hope. They sat around the dining table, the same one where I'd dropped the lie that started it all, and I felt the weight of their expectations, their doubts, their love. I didn't waste time. I was wrong, I said, my voice steady despite the knot in my throat. I lied to you, and I hurt you, and I'll carry that for the rest of my life. But I'm not here to ask for forgiveness. I'm here to ask for a chance to make it right. Clara's eyes narrowed, but she didn't interrupt. Marcus shifted in his chair, his fingers drumming on the table. Lila leaned forward, her hands clasped, waiting. I pulled out the journal, its leather cover worn from weeks of handling, and set it in the center of the table. This is everything, I said. Every word, every fight, every moment I saw you really saw you. I want you to read it, not to shame you, but to understand. Clara reached for it first, her hands hesitant, like she was afraid of what she'd find. She flipped through the pages, her expression shifting from anger to something softer, something like regret. Marcus took it next, his eyes scanning the words I'd written about his desperation, his mistakes. He didn't say anything, but his shoulders slumped, as if the truth was heavier than he'd expected. Lila was last, her fingers lingering on the pages, her eyes filling with tears as she read her own letter, the one I'd found in her sketchbook. When she looked up, she didn't speak, but she reached for my hand, and that was enough. We talked for hours, the kind of talk we hadn't had since Ellen was alive. Clara admitted she'd been scared of losing control, of watching the family's legacy slip through her fingers. I thought I had to fight for it, she said, her voice breaking. I didn't realize I was fighting you. Marcus confessed to the loans, the schemes, the things he'd taken. I was trying to prove I could be something, he said, his eyes on the floor. But I kept failing you. Lila was quieter, but her words carried the most weight. I didn't know how to fix us, she said. But I want to try. The 9th week was different. The air felt lighter, like the house could breathe again. Clara started coming over without her laptop, without her questions about the estate. She brought dinner one night, a lasagna she'd made herself, and we ate together, laughing at old stories. At the time, Marcus got stuck in a tree trying to impress a girl. Marcus started showing up sober, his phone off, his attention on us. He fixed the leaky faucet in the kitchen, a small gesture that felt like a promise. Lila moved back home, her canvases filling the house with color, her laughter filling the silence. They were trying, and so was I. I started rewriting the will in earnest, not just in my head, but on paper. I didn't change the shares not yet, but I added clauses, conditions, things to protect them from themselves. I gave Clara control of the lake house, but only if she agreed to share it with her siblings. I set aside a trust for Marcus, but with strict oversight, to keep him from burning through it. For Lila, I left a fund for her art, a way to support her without tying her to the family's battles. I showed them the draft, not to control them, but to show them I was listening, that I saw their efforts, their flaws, their hearts. The 10th week was the hardest. I had to face the truth about myself, about the man who'd lied to his children, who'd tested them instead of trusting them. I sat them down again, the journal between us, and told them about Ellen, about the promise I'd made to keep them together. I thought I was failing her, I said, my voice thick with emotion. I thought I had to force you to be a family. But I was wrong. You're already a family, even with the mess, even with the fights. And I'm proud of you. Clara cried then, the first time I'd seen her break in years. Marcus hugged me, his grip tight, like he was afraid to let go. Lila smiled, her hand in mine, and said, "We're not perfect, Dad, but we're yours." The will was finalized that week, but it wasn't the end. It was a beginning, a new chapter for us. The lie had broken us, but it had also forced us to see each other, to fight for each other, to rebuild what we'd lost. I don't know if we'll ever be the family we were when Ellen was here, but we're trying. And that's enough. The journal sits on my desk now, closed but not forgotten, a reminder of what we've been through, what we've survived. I look at my kids, Clara's determination, Marcus's hope, Lila's heart, and I know I don't need to test them anymore. They've already passed. The final days of the 10th week felt like waking from a long, troubled dream. The house, once a battlefield of shouted accusations and slammed doors, hummed with a tentative peace. Clara, Marcus, and Lila moved through it differently now, their steps lighter, their voices softer. I could still feel the scars of the lie I'd told, the way it had carved fault lines through us. But those lines were starting to mend, patched with small gestures and hard-won truths. I'd set out to test their loyalty, to see if they could rise above their flaws. But what I'd found was something messy, a more real a family that could break and still rebuild. Clara took to spending evenings with me, no longer armed with spreadsheets or lawyer's cards. One night, she brought over a bottle of wine, the same kind Ellen used to love, and we sat on the porch, watching the stars emerge. "I was so angry at you," she admitted, her voice low, the glass cradled in her hands. "But I was angrier at myself. I thought I had to be the one to hold everything together, and I pushed everyone away." I reached for her hand, feeling the strength in her grip, the same strength that had built her empire but also walled her off from us. "You don't have to do it alone," I said. She nodded, her eyes glistening, and for the first time, I saw the girl who used to run to me with scraped knees, trusting I'd make it better. Marcus was finding his footing, too, though his path was rockier. He started attending meetings for his drinking, his face flushed with a mix of shame and determination when he told me. "I want to be someone you're proud of," he said one afternoon, helping me clear out the garage. We found an old bike, the one he'd ridden as a kid, its tires flat, but its frame still sturdy. "Let's fix it up," I suggested, and we spent the day tinkering, laughing at his clumsy attempts to tighten the chain. It wasn't just the bike we were fixing, it was us, piece by piece. I wrote in the journal that night, "He's trying." That's more than I could have asked for. Lila's return was the quietest, but it meant the most. She moved back into her old room, her canvases spilling into the hallway, their colors brighter now, less stormy. One morning, she showed me a new painting, a family portrait, not the stiff, posed kind, but a chaotic, vibrant scene of us laughing around the dining table, Ellen's presence a soft glow in the background. "This is how I see us," she said, her voice steady. "Not perfect, but together." I pulled her into a hug, my throat tight, and realized she'd been the glue all along, holding on to hope when the rest of us had let go. The will was done, signed and notarized, but it wasn't the end of the story. I divided the estate as fairly as I could, with safeguards to protect them from their worst impulses. Clara got the lake house, but only if she opened it to her siblings for family gatherings. Marcus's trust was structured to support his recovery, with funds released gradually, tied to milestones he'd have to earn. Lila's fund was for her art, a way to give her freedom without the weight of expectation. I showed them the document, not as a threat, but as a promise, a commitment to trust them, to believe in them, even after everything. The journal became something else in those final days, not just a record of their failures, but a testament to their resilience. I wrote about Clara's laughter, Marcus's determination, Lila's heart. I wrote about myself, too, the man who'd lied, who'd doubted, but who was learning to love his children as they were, not as he'd wanted them to be. I didn't need to test them anymore. They'd shown me who they were, and it was enough. One evening, we gathered at the lake house, the first time we'd all been there together since Ellen's death. The air smelled of pine and water, the sky streaked with pink and gold. We cooked dinner together, bickering over who got to grill the steaks, laughing when Marcus burned the potatoes. Lila set up her easel by the water, sketching the sunset, while Clara and I played cards, her competitive streak making us both laugh until our sides hurt. It wasn't perfect, there were still silences, still moments where the past crept in, but it was ours. As the sun dipped below the horizon, I looked at my children, their faces lit by the fading light, and felt a peace I hadn't known in years. The lie had been a cruel spark, but it had burned away the illusions, leaving only the truth. We were a family, flawed and fractured, but still whole. I didn't know how many years I had left. The real diagnosis was still a shadow, a question mark, but I knew I'd spend them with them, fighting for every moment, every laugh, every tear. The journal's final entry was simple: "We're not done yet." I closed it, set it on the shelf beside Ellen's photo, and joined my kids by the fire. Clara handed me a marshmallow, Marcus teased me about my roasting skills, and Lila leaned against my shoulder, her sketchbook open to a drawing of us, together. I didn't need to rewrite my will anymore. I'd rewritten something better. The weeks that followed felt like a fragile truce, a delicate balance between the past and the future we were trying to build. The lake house became our anchor, a place where we could be the family we'd forgotten how to be. Clara took to organizing weekend trips there, her usual efficiency softened by a new warmth. She'd plan hikes or fishing trips, her laughter echoing through the trees as she teased Marcus about his terrible casting. Marcus, for his part, was showing up not just physically, but emotionally. He'd started a job, a small one at a local hardware store, but it was steady, and he carried himself with a quiet pride I hadn't seen in years. Lila filled the house with her art, her paintings lining the walls, each one a step toward healing. But the shadow of the lie lingered, surfacing in unexpected moments. One night at the lake house, Clara found an old photo of us from a Christmas years ago, when Ellen was still with us. She held it up, her smile fading. "Did you really think we'd let you down, Dad?" she asked, her voice soft but sharp. I didn't answer right away, the weight of her question pressing down on me. I was scared, I admitted finally. Scared you'd drift apart without me. I thought I had to force you to see what mattered. She nodded, but her eyes were distant, and I knew the wound wasn't fully healed. Marcus struggled, too. He'd slip sometimes, a missed meeting or a night at the bar, and I'd see the guilt in his eyes the next day. But he kept trying, and that was enough. One afternoon, he showed me a letter he'd written to Ellen, something he'd done in one of his meetings. I told her I'm sorry, he said, his voice thick, for not being the son she deserved. I hugged him, feeling the boy he'd been and the man he was becoming, and told him she'd be proud. I meant it. Lila was the one who surprised me most. She started teaching art classes at a community center, her passion spilling over into the kids she taught. One day, she brought one of her students to the house, a shy girl with a sketchbook full of promise. "This is what you've given me, Dad," Lila said, her eyes bright. A way to keep going, to make something beautiful. I saw Ellen in her then, in the way she nurtured, the way she loved without holding back. It was a reminder that the best parts of us hadn't been lost, just buried. The will was a constant presence, not as a threat, but as a reminder of what we'd been through. I'd catch Clara glancing at the safe where I kept it, her curiosity tempered by something new: trust, maybe, or hope. Marcus didn't ask about it anymore, his focus on rebuilding himself, not chasing what I'd leave behind. Lila never mentioned it, but her paintings told me everything, each one a step toward forgiveness, toward family. We started new traditions, small ones that felt like promises. Sunday dinners at the lake house, where we'd cook together, bickering and laughing in equal measure. Game nights, where Clara's competitive streak would surface, only to be undercut by Marcus's terrible puns. Lila would sketch us as we played, her pencil capturing the moments I wanted to hold onto forever. These were the threads that bound us, fragile but growing stronger. I kept writing in the journal, not as a record of their failures, but as a celebration of their growth. I wrote about Clara's smile, the way it lit up when she talked about her plans for the lake house. I wrote about Marcus's hands, calloused from work, steady now in a way they hadn't been. I wrote about Lila's laughter, the sound that filled the house like music. And I wrote about myself, the father who'd made mistakes but was learning to listen, to love, to let go. One night, as we sat by the fire at the lake house, I told them about Ellen's last words to me. "She said to keep you close," I said, my voice steady despite the ache in my chest. I thought I'd failed her, but I see now that I didn't. "You're here. We're here." Clara reached for my hand. Marcus nodded, his eyes bright with unshed tears, and Lila leaned against me, her warmth a reminder of everything we'd fought for. The journal's pages were nearly full now, each one a step toward redemption, not just for them, but for me. I'd lied to them, tested them, hurt them, but I'd also given them a chance to see themselves, to choose who they wanted to be. And they'd chosen each other, chosen us. The will was just paper, a formality. The real legacy was this: the laughter, the tears, the moments we'd stolen back from the chaos. As the fire crackled, I looked at my children, their faces softened by the glow, and knew we weren't done. There would be more fights, more mistakes, more days when the past would creep in. But there would also be more nights like this, more chances to be a family. I didn't need to rewrite my will anymore. I'd rewritten something better: our story. The lake house became our sanctuary, a place where the wounds of the past could heal, however slowly. Each visit felt like a step forward, a reclaiming of the family we'd nearly lost. Clara took charge of the garden, planting roses like the ones Ellen used to tend, her hands in the dirt a quiet apology for the years she'd spent building walls. Marcus built a fire pit by the water, his hands steady as he stacked the stones, his laughter louder than it had been in years. Lila painted murals on the deck, vibrant scenes of us together, her art a bridge between the past and the present. I watched them, my heart full, knowing that the lie had broken us, but also given us these a chance to start again. There were still moments of tension, echoes of the chaos I'd unleashed. Clara would snap when Marcus left dishes in the sink, her old need for control flaring up. Marcus would retreat when Clara pushed too hard, his insecurities creeping back. Lila would go quiet sometimes, her eyes distant, as if she were still carrying the weight of my betrayal. But these moments were fewer, softer, smoothed over by the routines we'd built: coffee in the mornings, walks by the lake, stories shared over flickering flames. One afternoon, Clara found me in the study, the journal open on my desk. "You're still writing in that thing?" she asked, her tone half teasing, half curious. I nodded, closing it gently. "It's not about keeping score anymore," I said. "It's about remembering who we are." She sat beside me, her shoulder brushing mine, and for the first time, I felt like she saw Minute as a dying man, not as a bank, but as her father. "I'm sorry," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "For the things I did, the things I said. I thought I was protecting us, but I was just scared." I hugged her, feeling the years fall away, and told her I was sorry too. Marcus's progress was slower, but it was real. He showed me his pay stubs one day, proud of the hours he'd worked, the money he'd earned without asking for a handout. "I'm not there yet," he said, his eyes meeting mine. "But I'm trying." I saw Ellen in him then, in the stubborn hope that had always driven her, and I knew he'd make it. We spent an evening fixing up the old canoe, sanding the wood until it gleamed, talking about the summers we'd spent paddling across the lake. It wasn't just about the boat, it was about rebuilding trust, one stroke at a time. Lila's art was her way of speaking, and I listened. She invited me to one of her classes, where I watched her guide her students, her voice gentle but sure. One of her paintings hung on the community center's wall, a vibrant scene of a family holding hands under a stormy sky. "That's us," she told me later, her smile shy but proud. "We made it through." I hugged her, my throat tight, and realized she'd been the one holding us together all along, even when I hadn't seen it. The will was no longer a specter looming over us. I'd shown them the final version, explained the clauses, the trusts, the safeguards. Clara nodded, her eyes clear, accepting the terms without argument. Marcus read it carefully, his fingers tracing the words, and thanked me for giving him a chance to prove himself. Lila just smiled, her hand in mine, and said, "It's not about the money, Dad. It's about us." I knew then that I'd done something right, even if it had taken a lie to get there. The journal was nearly full, its pages a tapestry of our journey: anger, betrayal, forgiveness, love. I wrote about the small victories, the moments that felt like miracles, Clara's laughter, Marcus's steadiness, Lila's warmth. I wrote about Ellen, too, about how I felt her with us, guiding us even now. The lie had been my mistake, but it had also been my salvation, forcing us to face the truths we'd buried. One night, as we sat by the fire pit, the lake reflecting the stars, I told them I was proud of them. "Not because you're perfect," I said, my voice thick, "but because you're mine." Clara leaned against me, Marcus grinned, and Lila sketched us, her pencil moving in the firelight. The past wasn't go night, never would be, but it no longer defined us. We were building something new, something stronger. The journal's final pages were for the future. I wrote about the family we could be, the one we were becoming. I wrote about the lake house, the dinners, the laughter. I wrote about Ellen, about how she'd smile if she could see us now. And I wrote about myself, the father who'd lied but learned, who'd lost but found his way back. The will was just a piece of paper. The real legacy was this: the family we'd fought for, the love we'd reclaimed. The seasons were changing, the air growing cooler, the leaves at the lake house turning gold and red. The house felt alive again, filled with the sounds of my children: Clara's voice calling out instructions for dinner, Marcus's laughter as he tripped over a root, Lila's soft humming as she painted. The lie that had fractured us was fading, its sharp edges dulled by the work we'd put in, the truths we'd faced. But I knew it wasn't over, not completely. Healing is a process, not a destination, and we were still learning to walk this new path together. Clara was the first to bring up the future. We were sitting on the dock one morning, coffee mugs in hand, the water lapping at the posts. "What happens when you're really gone, Dad?" she asked, her voice steady but vulnerable. "Not now, but someday. How do we keep this?" She gestured to the lake, the house, the family we'd rebuilt. I didn't have an easy answer, but I told her the truth. "You keep it by choosing each other," I said. "Every day, even when it's hard." She nodded, her eyes on the horizon, and I saw a resolve in her I hadn't noticed before: not the cold ambition of the past, but a quiet determination to hold us together. Marcus was finding his own way, his steps surer with each day. He'd been promoted at the hardware store, a small thing, but it lit him up in a way I hadn't seen since he was a kid with big dreams. One evening, he showed me a business plan, not one of his wild schemes, but a practical idea for a repair shop, something he could build with his own hands. "I want to do this right," he said, his voice steady. "For you, for Mom, for me." I read the plan, saw the care he'd put into it, and told him I'd help however I could, not with money, but with belief. He grinned, and for the first time, I saw a man who could stand on his own. Lila's art was blooming, her classes growing, her paintings gaining attention at local galleries. She invited us to an exhibit, her first real show, and we stood in a crowded room, surrounded by her work. Each canvas told a story, ours, hers, the world's. There was one painting that stopped me cold. A family on a bridge, the structure cracked but held together with golden threads. Kintsugi, she called it, the Japanese art of repairing broken things with gold. "That's us," she whispered, her hand in mine. "Broken, but beautiful." I hugged her, my eyes burning, and knew she'd found her voice, her strength, her place. The will was settled, but it wasn't the end of our story. I'd added a letter to it, one I'd written in the journal first, then copied for the lawyer. It wasn't part of the legal document, just words from me to them, to be read when I was gone. "You are my heart," I wrote. "Not the money, not the house, not the things I leave behind. You. Keep choosing each other, and you'll never lose what matters." I didn't show them the letter not yet, but I knew they'd find it when the time came, and I hoped it would be enough. The journal was my companion through it all, its pages a record of our journey. I wrote about the lake house, the way it held our memories, our fights, our laughter. I wrote about Clara's strength, Marcus's redemption, Lila's grace. I wrote about Ellen, about how she'd be proud of us, of the family we'd become. And I wrote about myself, the man who'd made mistakes but found his way back to his children, to love. One night, as we sat around the fire pit, the stars bright above us, I told them I was grateful. "For you," I said, my voice thick. "For this." Clara smiled, her hand resting on mine. Marcus nodded, his eyes clear, his heart open. Lila leaned against me, her sketchbook open to a drawing of us, together, whole. The lie had been a spark, but this was the fire, warm and steady, burning away the past. The journal's final entry was a promise: "We'll keep going." I closed it, set it beside Ellen's photo, and joined my children by the fire. The lake stretched out before us, its surface calm, reflecting the sky. We were a family, not perfect, but ours. And that was enough. The lake house glowed under the autumn sun, its windows catching the light, its walls holding our story. The lie that had started it all was a distant memory now, a wound that had scarred over but left us stronger. Clara, Marcus, and Lila moved through the days with a new rhythm, their laughter louder, their silences softer. I watched them, my heart full, knowing that the test I'd put them through had revealed more than I'd ever expected, not just their flaws, but their capacity to grow, to forgive, to love. Clara was planning a family reunion, not just for us but for cousins, aunts, uncles, the extended web of kin we'd neglected for too long. She stood in the kitchen, her phone buzzing with texts, her voice bright as she coordinated dates and menus. "We're doing this right, Dad," she said, her smile wide. "No more drifting." I saw Ellen in her then, in the way she gathered people, made them feel seen. I hugged her, feeling the strength that had always been there, now tempered with warmth. Marcus was building something real. His repair shop was taking shape, a small space in town where he fixed bikes and lawnmowers, his hands steady, his pride palpable. He brought me to see it one day, the smell of oil and metal filling the air. "This is mine," he said, his voice steady. "Not a handout, not a scheme. Mine." I clapped him on the shoulder, my throat tight, and told him Ellen would have loved it. He grinned, and I knew he was finding his way, one repair at a time. Lila's art was everywhere now, her paintings in galleries, her classes packed with kids who saw the world through her eyes. She brought me to another exhibit, this one bigger, brighter, filled with people who loved her work. She pointed to a painting of the lake house, its windows glowing, its porch alive with us. "This is home," she said, her voice soft but sure. I hugged her, my heart swelling, and knew she'd found her place, not just in the world but in our family. The will was done, locked away in the safe, but it wasn't the end. It was a foundation, a promise that I'd trust them to carry on. The letter I'd written was with it, a final gift to them, a reminder of what they meant to me. I didn't need to rewrite my will anymore. I'd rewritten us, and that was enough. The journal was full, its pages a testament to our journey. I wrote about the lake house, the fire pit, the dinners. I wrote about Clara's resolve, Marcus's redemption, Lila's light. I wrote about Ellen, about how she was with us, in every laugh, every touch. And I wrote about myself, the father who'd lied but learned, who'd doubted but believed. The final night at the lake house was quiet, the kind of quiet that feels full, not empty. We sat by the fire, the stars bright above us, the lake whispering its secrets. Clara told a story about Ellen, one I hadn't heard, about a time she danced in the rain with them as kids. Marcus laughed, adding his own memory, his voice clear, his heart open. Lila sketched us, her pencil moving in the firelight, capturing the moment. I looked at my children, their faces lit by the flames, and knew we'd made it. The lie had been a spark, but this was the fire warm, steady, eternal. We were a family, not perfect, but whole. And as the fire burned low, I felt Ellen with us, her smile in the stars, her love in our hearts. The journal was closed, the will was set, but our story was just beginning.